What if everything you bought was a lie, but the transaction, the desire, the hole you were trying to fill? What if the entire system of money and markets wasn't just a neutral tool, but a spiritual trap? One man saw this with terrifying clarity in an age of glittering decadence and quiet despair. He didn't write an economic policy, he wrote a warning for the human soul, spoken into the whirlwind of commerce. And for that, they tried to erase him. His name was Al-Ghazali, and 9 centuries ago he connected money to morality in a way that could collapse our modern world. The crisis. Picture Baghdad in the 11th century, the center of the world, a crucible where caravans from China met ships from Venice. A golden age of trade, science, and unimaginable wealth built on a fragile web of promises and debt. Palaces of scholars, rivers of gold coins, markets that stretched for miles, smelling of spice, leather, and human sweat. It was a triumph of human progress, a monument to the empire of the mind and the purse. But Al-Ghazali looked at this splendor and saw a sickness festering in the shadows of the grand arches. He saw a civilization that had mastered the art of making money, but had forgotten why. He watched as merchants perfected their scales down to the grain, while their souls corroded with a quiet, relentless greed. He saw scholars arguing over tiny points of law in heated, luxurious courtyards, while ignoring the canyon of corruption growing beneath their feet. The system was functioning perfectly. Its gears were polished, its ledgers balanced, and it was rotting from the inside, a beautiful corpse awaiting its final collapse. Al-Ghazali held the highest position a scholar could dream of. He was the star of the Nizamiya, the most prestigious university in Baghdad, a fortress of orthodoxy. He had power, respect, money, the rewards for a brilliant mind that played by the rules. And then he walked away. In the middle of his life, at the peak of his success, he vanished, leaving whispers of madness and scandal in his wake. For 11 years, he disappeared into the desert, into a journey of self-confrontation so severe it shattered his health. He wasn't running from the world, he was dissecting its fever, feeling for the source of the infection. And what he discovered in the silence was that the economy wasn't a separate machine. It was the circulatory system of the soul of a civilization, and every dishonest coin, every exploitative contract was a clot in its veins. If the blood was poisoned, everything, the law, the faith, the state, would die from within. When he returned, gaunt and haunted by truth, he wrote a book not of economics, but of survival. Its title was deceptively simple, The Revival of the Religious Sciences. Its message was a quiet detonation under the foundations of power. He declared every single transaction, every purchase, every coin you earn is a moral act, a prayer or a curse made tangible. It is either moving you towards light or towards darkness, etching its consequence onto your essence. There is no neutral ground, there is only choice, repeated with every breath of commerce.
Imagine a world where your money could suddenly be worthless, where the price of bread could double in a single day, where a government stamp on a piece of parchment meant the difference between eating and starving. This wasn't a financial crisis or a modern collapse. This was everyday life. This was the economy in the time of Jesus. The sound of coins. Walk with me through the dust of Jerusalem. Hear that sound? That metallic clink echoing through the temple courtyard? It wasn't just prayer that filled the air here. It was the sound of commerce, the sound of control. Every coin told a story of power, and every transaction was a quiet battle. In this world, there were 3 currencies, and each one was a tool of a different master. First, the Roman denarius. It bore the face of Caesar, a stark reminder with every purchase who was in charge. This coin paid your taxes to a distant empire. It paid the soldiers who occupied your streets. Using it was an act of political surrender. Then the Greek drachma, the currency of trade and the wider world, the currency of the merchant class who moved between empires, fluid, accepted, but forever foreign. And finally, the Jewish shekel, the only currency pure enough to pay the temple tax, the only coin acceptable to God, they said. This created a problem, a very profitable problem, because you couldn't use Caesar's idolatrous coin in God's house, so you had to exchange it, and that's where the system revealed its teeth. In the shadow of the temple, the money changers set their tables. They had the only license to turn Roman coins into holy shekels, and they charged a fee, a heavy fee. This wasn't a service, it was a toll on faith, a religious tax on top of the imperial tax. Think about that pressure, the grinding weight of two empires, one political, one spiritual, both with their hands in your purse. The true power brokers. Forget the idea of a simple agricultural society. This was a pyramid of economic control. At the very bottom, the peasant farmers and fishermen. They lived one bad harvest away from disaster. Above them, the artisans and small merchants. Then the rising class of tax collectors, the most hated men in Judea. They were locals who bought the right to collect taxes for Rome. They were told how much to send back to the empire. Anything they collected over that amount, they kept. This system incentivized brutality. It turned countrymen into predators. But above them all were two powers locked in a silent partnership, the Roman governor Pilate and the Jewish high priest Caiaphas. One held the swords, the other held the scripture. Together they maintained order, because chaos was bad for business. The temple wasn't just a place of worship, it was the central bank of Judea, a vast repository of wealth, land, and tribute. The priesthood controlled the grain stores, the records, the debts. When the poor couldn't pay their temple tithe, they fell into debt they could never escape. Because debt had a final, terrifying consequence. You could sell yourself, or worse, sell your family. Indentured servitude was the bottom of the economic ladder. A Hebrew could serve a fellow Hebrew for 6 years, but in the 7th year, the law demanded they be set free. This was the ancient safety net, but the powerful found a way around it. They could sell you to a foreigner, or convert your debt into terms that never expired. The law was twisted by those who wrote its interpretations. Sound familiar? This is the economic world hidden within the parables. When Jesus spoke of a master forgiving a servant's enormous unpayable debt, every single listener knew that weight. They had felt it. When he told of workers in a vineyard getting paid the same wage, it wasn't a lesson about fairness. It was a bomb thrown at the entire logic of their economy, a system that kept you desperate day by day. He didn't just attack the money changers' tables, he attacked the entire machine they represented. The real rebellion wasn't just spiritual, it was financial. To forgive debts was to shatter the chains of the system. To share bread equally was to ignore the price controls of the market. To claim a kingdom not of this world was a direct threat to the economic order that Caesar and Caiaphas had built. This is why he was a threat. Not because of vague ideas about love, but because his teachings could collapse the entire economic order, an order built on debt, purity, and fear. The shadow of the cross. Think about the final week. He enters Jerusalem with palm branches, a symbol of national revolution. His first act is to storm the temple's financial quarter. He doesn't go to the Roman fort. He attacks the economic engine. He disrupts the flow of money that kept the peace between Rome and the priesthood. In that moment, he signed his own death warrant. The priests needed the money changers. Rome needed the priests. The system had to protect itself. So what does this ancient economy tell us? The methods change, the coins look different, but the architecture of control remains. Today, we don't have money changers in temples. We have exchange rates and transaction fees. We don't have debt slavery. We have credit scores that dictate our lives. We don't have a temple tax, but do you feel the toll of believing in the system? The pressure to participate, to consume, to owe? The question from that time still hangs in the air, unanswered. Not who do you pray to, but who do you pay? And what happens when you stop? If you want more stories like this, stories about money, power, and the systems hidden in history, subscribe to the channel. This is Hidden Financial Historian.